From the Blues Hotel Collective, welcome to Blues Moments in Time, where every groove holds a memory and every moment echoes the truth of what came before. Today, we rewind the reel, trace the footsteps, and revisit the chapters that shaped the blues. Here is our host, Kelvin Huggins.
Welcome to Blues Moments in Time, the podcast dedicated to exploring the rich history and cultural significance of blues music. Today, we're diving into the events that shaped the blues on January 10, from the birth of boundary-pushing musicians to the passing of a towering Chicago legend. This date traces a powerful arc through blues history. Let's start with the cultural landscape. On January 10, the story of blues culture is written as much in ink as it is in sound. In 1917, Jerry Wexler was born, a man who would later help rename the very marketplace in which black music lived. As a journalist, Wexler coined the term rhythm and blues, replacing the industry's race records label, and in doing so, nudged the language of the business towards something less overly segregated and more respectful of the music's artistry. That shift mattered for blues. It reframed how record stores filed the music, how radio stations announced it, and how listeners discovered it. A few years later, on another January 10, drummer Max Roach entered the world in 1924. Now, Roach would become a giant of modern jazz, but his influence spilled far beyond bebop clubs. His insistence that music could speak directly to civil rights and black liberation helped shape a broader cultural climate in which blues musicians too could see their songs as more than entertainment, as testimony, protest, and memory. And then there's the cultural shadow cast by Howlin Wolf's passing on January 10, 1976. Wolf wasn't just a singer, he was an image, a myth, a presence. His hulking frame, his gravelly roar, and his intense stage performances became a template for what an urban bluesman looked and sounded like. When he died, it wasn't only a personal loss, it felt like a chapter closing in the visual and emotional language of the blues. Now let's turn our attention to the political climate. January 10 doesn't give us single headline grabbing law or protest tied directly to the blues, but it does give us people whose lives were deeply political in their impact. Jerry Wexler's decision to champion the term rhythm and blues was, in its own way, a quiet act of resistance against the industry's segregationist habits. By changing the label on that bin, he helped change who felt invited to reach in and pull out a record. That mattered for blues artists trying to cross over from black-only markets into a broader listening public. Max Roach's birth on this date reminds us that the lines between jazz, blues, and politics are porous. Roach would later record music that directly confronted racism and celebrated black struggle, and his stance helped normalise the idea that black musicians could be outspoken, unapologetically political artists. Blues players working the same circuits, Chicago clubs, southern juke joints, northern theatres, were part of that same ecosystem where every song about hard times or injustice carried a political charge, whether or not it was labelled that way. And then there's Howlin Wolf's life story, which reads like a political map of 20th century black America. Born on a Mississippi plantation, he carried the sound of Delta North to Chicago, riding the same great migration currents that moved millions of black Southerners toward industrial jobs and new lives. His success with Chess Records and his later influence on British rock bands highlights the uneasy politics of cultural exchange. Black blues musicians shaping global music, while often seeing others reap the biggest financial rewards. When Wolf died on January 10, 1976, that tension didn't end, but one of its most powerful voices fell silent. And of course, no discussion of blues history would be complete without exploring the music itself. Musically, January 10 is dominated by the echo of Howlin Wolf's last day. Wolf was one of the principal architects of Chicago's electric blues, taking the raw acoustic Delta sound and plugging it into amplifiers, turning it into something that could cut through the noise of a crowded city bar. Tracks like Moanin' at Midnight, Smokestack Lightnin', and Killing Floor, they weren't just songs, they were blueprints for how a band could sound. Snarling guitar, driving rhythm section, and a voice that sounded like it had swallowed the train, the factory, and the night all at once. When Wolf died on January 10 in 1976, the blues world lost more than a performer. It lost a living link to the first generation of electric innovators. Yet, his music kept travelling through British rock bands who covered his songs, through American guitarists who studied his records, and through festivals and museums that would later bear his name. January 10 becomes, in that sense, a musical hinge, a day when one era closed, even as the sound he helped forge continued to ripple outward. But January 10 is also a day of beginnings. Eddie, the Chief Clearwater, born January 10, 1935, in Macon, Mississippi, would later become a key figure in Chicago's Westside blues scene. Clearwater's guitar style fused traditional blues phrasing with rock and roll fire, and his stage presence, sometimes complete with headdresses and flamboyant outfits, pushed the visual spectacle of blues performance into new territory. His albums and tours helped keep Chicago blues in front of international audiences, proving that the music Wolf helped define could evolve without losing its core. Byron Wildchild Gibson, born January 10, 1930, fronted Wildchild Gibson and the Violators, embodying the working band reality of blues life. His story, balancing military service, everyday responsibilities and music, mirrors that of countless regional blues musicians who may never become household names but who keep the tradition alive night after night on local stages. January 10 has also marked the beginning of life for some incredible blues musicians. Let's linger a little longer on those births. Eddie Clearwater's journey from Mississippi to Chicago traces a familiar blues migration route, but his sound and image were anything but routine. As a left-handed guitarist who sometimes played upside down, he brought a physical flair to his performances that matched his musical energy. His later recordings like Westside Strut show a musician who understood the roots of the music but wasn't afraid to lean into rock grooves, horn arrangements and modern production, proving that the blues could be both traditional and forward-looking at the same time. Byron Wildchild Gibson's birth on this date added another layer to the story. His work with the Violators speaks to the importance of regional bands that may never top charts but become legends in their own communities. These are the groups that play the neighbourhood bars, the local festivals, the family reunions, the places where blues remain a living, breathing language rather than a museum piece. January 10, in that sense, is a reminder that the blues is sustained not only by stars, but by working musicians whose names might never appear in history books, yet whose sound shapes local memory. And when we widen the lens to include Jerry Wexler and Max Roach, both born on January 10, we see how the date gathers people who shaped the environment around the blues. Wexler helped rename and reframe black popular music in the marketplace, while Roach helped assert that black music could be explicitly political and artistically daring. Their lives created conditions in which blues musicians could be heard, respected and at times better compensated. Sadly, January 10 has also been a day of loss. The most profound loss for the blues on this date is the death of Howlin Wolf. Just picture it. January 10 in 1976, Wolf, who had spent decades roaring his way through clubs, studios and television appearances, dies from complications related to kidney surgery. The man who once seemed larger than life, physically and musically, was gone, but his legacy was already too big to disappear. Wolf had taken lessons from Charlie Patton, absorbed the sound of Blind Lemon Jefferson, and turned that knowledge into a style that was unmistakably his own. His collaborations with guitarist Hubert Sumlin and songwriter-producer Willie Dixon produced some of the most enduring sides in the blues canon, songs that would be covered by the Rolling Stones and countless others. After his death, festivals, museums and Hall of Fame inductions kept his name alive, and his records continued to serve as a masterclass for anyone who wanted to understand what electric blues could be. So when we mark January 10 as the day Howlin Wolf left this world, we're not just noting a date on the calendar, we're acknowledging a turning point. The first wave of electric blues giants were passing, and it was up to the next generations, including players like Eddie Clearwater, to carry that fire forward. And that's all the time we have for today's episode of Blues Moments in Time. January 10 gives us a powerful cross-section of blues history, the birth of innovators, the shaping of industry language, the intertwining of music and politics, and the passing of a legend whose voice still shakes the walls. Join us again next time as we continue to explore the fascinating history of the blues.